Quindi grazie molte per essere qui. Dicevo che questo è il primo incontro di una lunga giornata che è fatta di 5 conferenze, 2 mostre che vedete qui di fianco e sotto e 3 eventi extra che sono sparsi per il castello. È stata un'iniziativa dei curatori della Biennale che ci hanno invitato a promuovere una presenza al castello di incontri dedicati all'architettura della città. Siamo particolarmente contenti di averlo fatto perché questo dà a questo luogo un'identità ancora più chiara come sede storica del Politecnico e oggi sede dei 2 dipartimenti che riguardano l'architettura e la città. A questo proposito lascio la parola ad Andrea per un saluto anche da parte tua. I programmi della giornata sono qui, sono fuori, trovate come si articolerà tutto il giorno oggi al Castello. Grazie.
Grazie Michele, io davvero non ho nulla da aggiungere e non voglio rubare tempo invece all'incontro. Diciamo così soltanto questa nota che è ragionevole insomma, da parte di un soggetto che organizza un evento così complesso come la Biennale Tecnologia di voler ottimizzare la logistica e quindi magari concentrare lo sforzo su Corso Duca degli Abruzzi, però ci sembrava una cosa, un peccato insomma, che una delle sedi che veniva utilizzata negli anni precedenti non si utilizzasse più. Abbiamo insistito perché invece ci fosse questa giornata, una giornata che raduna degli eventi tra di loro anche molto diversi ma tutti eccellenti, interessantissimi, quindi siamo molto lieti di poterla inaugurare. Grazie di essere venuti e spero che vi divertiate.
Grazie. La parola a Maria Cristina Milanese, Presidente dell'Ordine degli Architetti, che ha qui un doppio ruolo, sia la collaborazione all'intera giornata di oggi, ma sia anche una collaborazione su una ricerca legata all'intelligenza artificiale nella pratica professionale che Politecnico e Ordine hanno fatto insieme, che sarà il punto di partenza per questo primo incontro. Grazie.
Buongiorno a tutti, grazie dell'invito, del doppio invito nella veste ufficiale, nella veste di patrocinante anche dell'iniziativa. Lo racconteranno presumo successivamente, però l'Ordine di Torino che rappresento come 7.000 iscritti tra liberi professionisti e dipendenti, perché poi all'interno abbiamo anche i dipendenti, ha aderito ad un progetto del Politecnico e ad un questionario. Abbiamo trasmesso un questionario del Politecnico sull'intelligenza e l'uso dell'intelligenza artificiale in architettura ai 7.000 iscritti. Da questo sono poi usciti dei risultati che penso verranno descritti successivamente. Però una riflessione la vorrei fare perché mi è rimasta impressa una frase che è stata scritta da un filosofo che dice: meglio un folle per proprio conto che un saggio con le opinioni altrui. E su questa riflessione inviterei a ragionare perché dietro all'intelligenza artificiale, lo sappiamo, c'è la nostra intelligenza umana che è quella che ci dà la possibilità di far crescere l'intelligenza artificiale, ma c'è anche una etica, un aspetto sociale che spesso viene forse anche un po' dimenticato o trascurato a seconda di quelli che sono i prompt che noi stiamo dando all'intelligenza artificiale. Quindi secondo me il limite di questo sistema che tutti quanti noi utilizziamo banalmente anche semplicemente l'accensione delle luci in città piuttosto che nel proprio appartamento, alzare o non alzare con la domotica le nostre persiane e tapparelle, questo diventa come dire, il tramite di un'agevolazione sicuramente, ma diventa anche un limite che è dovuto da come viene programmato. Questa è la riflessione che faccio io da architetto del vecchio ordinamento, come dico sempre. Quindi ringrazio i relatori, ringrazio il Politecnico per lo studio svolto e sono curiosa di sentire che cosa viene detto. Grazie.
Grazie. Okay, we can start with the first panel. Thank you very much also from our side to our guest. Thank you for coming to Politecnico di Torino. And I leave the floor to Eduardo Bruno for the first panel.
Really happy to start today these many conversation, debates we will have in this very beautiful place in the Castello Valentino. Today we are having this conversation, Building the Future, Artificial Intelligence from Theory to Practice. I would like just to launch, there won't be any presentation, it's more like a conversation. So I would like really to invite you to join with questions, curiosities, because the topic is quite wide, no? Artificial intelligence, especially regarding how we, as let's say humans, are having, say, new links with artificial intelligence, but also we as architects, so creating very new big challenges. Luciana Mastrolia and Federica Gardella are our two PhD candidates in this faculty. Will present shortly a project that has been also supported by l'Ordine Architetti di Torino, how practitioners in our cities are engaging with AI. But also today, this conversation will be with two very nice guests that also yesterday have been invited in our ACC lecture series, particularly Fredy Fortich. Fredy Fortich is an architect engineer specializing in computational design, BIM coordination, performance-based design, generative design, and machine learning methods. He holds a Master's of Science in Building Technology from TU Delft and Master of Architecture from Universidad de los Andes, Bogotá. He is a technical architect serving simultaneously as BIM manager at MVRDV French studio, as well as AI researcher on diffusion models for MVRDV Next. Today also joining Professor Daniel Cardoso, that is Associate Professor of Architecture at Carnegie Mellon University, where he chairs the graduate program in computational design and directs the Code Lab, a research and learning laboratory, this is very important for our conversation, rethinking the role of computation in the design and production of the built environment. He's author of publication, exhibition, and technologies, critically exploring the nexus of design and computation, including the book Builders of the Vision, Software and the Imagination of Design. Also, I would like to mention his new book, Designing the Computational Design Image, Imagining Computational Design, co-edited with Teodora Varduli, draws from historical and contemporary materials to trace the emergence of computational design ideas and practices across a broader landscape of institutions, US, UK, and Canada. Thank you so much for this panel conversation. We will start this presentation from Luciana and Federica. Thank you so much. And I hope I will moderate the session this morning. I hope really to engage with you. Thank you so much.
Hey, good morning all and welcome. I'm going to briefly tell you something about this project. As it was just said, it was born from the collaboration between the TDP Lab, so Architectural Design Theory Laboratory Research Group, and the Ordine degli Architetti of Torino. And its purpose is that of exploring and describing the architect's experiences in the use of AI tools. Architectural practices in Torino, as the general trend of Italian practices, are most of the times very small, composed by 5-6 professionals and as an average. So the purpose wasn't that of discovering exceptional use of these tools, but on the contrary, that of observing how these instruments could enter in the ordinary and small design practices and which are its implications. The project officially started in July 2023. The first phase involved submitting a survey to practitioners. The objective was to broadly understand who was already using artificial intelligence tools and in which way. Analysis of the responses led us to select a sample of firms that participated in the next phase of the project, that of the interviews, started in October 2023. And finally, the contribution collected from the interviews were analyzed and allowed us to identify some issues that we shared at first during an event in March, a public debate in which we invited all the architects of the order to attend and discuss with us about the results, and now today with you. In particular, the survey was divided in 5 sections. In the first one, everyone was asked to give a personal definition of AI and then of AI applied to the architectural practice. Then, professionals were asked whether or not they were already using AI tools. And it was at this point that only those who had responded positively had access to the next questions. These questions concerned the request to indicate the main tools they had used, the phase of the project in which they had been employed, and the reasons why they had chosen to use them. At the end, it was asked to briefly tell about an application experience. In total, 73 responses were received, and among them, 30% of practitioners indicated that they already use AI tool in their practice. Among the tools used, ChatGPT came up on the top, and next in line, almost on a par, are Midjourney and DALI, both tools conceived to generate images. Regarding the areas of application, it prevails the support of AI during the activity of constructing the design concept, where these tools seem to stimulate more the designer's activity. Then we have, with equal merit, the production of rendering and images and the generation of texts and project reports. And again, with less weight, the modeling of design alternatives. In addition to this initial numerical data, the designers were asked to briefly recount their experience of using this tool, and it was precisely those answers which, compared with the previous ones, formed the basis for the selection of 8 practices to be interviewed in the next phase. During the interview, each study was asked to talk in more detail about the use of AI in their practice, and this allowed us to further analyze and compare their experiences. Now, I will try to start to go deeper in this part to raise some questions that have emerged just from this experience. The first reflection concerns a kind of redistribution of work that the use of AI tools seems to allow. In particular, the process of producing the first project suggestions seems to be positively supported by AI. In fact, the high degree of image clarity is now achieved in a very short time, and this replaces the lengthy process that used to involve in some weeks and with inevitable delays in dealing with clients. First development of 2D drawings, then a 3D model, and at the end, the project renders. Work that becomes even longer when very different design alternatives are to be provided. Represented here, there is a project board developed by one of the practices involved in the project for the participation in a public competition. The particular aspect of this board here is that all the renders used in the board were produced only by using AI tools, so no traditional methods were adopted. At the same time, among the practitioners, there is someone that struggles himself somehow about the authorship of these images and texts generated by AI. In particular, one of them told us about this feeling of imposter while trying to produce these materials. And he told us that he felt, especially in the first times, like when he went to school and copied during a class test. And he still hasn't made up with this.
Thank you. So, let's go further. In the background of all of this, there is a very important concept that is the one of delegation. So what do the architects are willing to delegate to AI? From the perspective of image production, we find the use of these tools for the creation of inspirational mood boards or conceptual references to show to the client different possibilities in order to open the discussion during the first meetings and first exchanges, for example. This production also influenced the architect's design choices. These images acted, for example, as replacement for the research of actual design references, which is considered more time-consuming and less effective from the point of view of the suggestions that can be obtained. The construction of design alternatives is followed by the generation of images that aim to replace the production of photorealistic renderings. This type of delegation not only requires much less work time for the designer, but also allows for quick testing of different aesthetic possibilities and design solutions before proceeding to the final project. However, in this case, architects emphasize even more than in the production of concept images that you must be competent in order to give the right inputs to the program. With regard to text production, the spectrum of experiment is even broader. So in this case, one interesting case involved the writing of text to participate in competition for which there were specific requirements to be satisfied. In this case, AI helped to build connections between the competition call with the requirements and selection criteria and the text produced by the designers with their curriculum and competencies. In other cases, AI has been used, for example, to help in writing technical reports or other very repetitive tasks, such as parcel proposals, for example. Finally, AI seems to be used as an emotional mediator in long-distance communication, such as email and texts and messages, to adjust the nuances of the discourse due to the complexity of managing maybe the relationship with the client. Talking about delegating the task allows us to make some reflections about the limits and boundaries between the activities and operations of these tools and the designer's activities. First, constraints were raised about the feasibility of the image proposed by AI. So architects were questioning, were trying to understand, yes, this image is great, but who will build it? How much does it cost? Is it feasible, and is it feasible with the Italian regulations, for example? In this case, the architect's critical thinking skills in filtering the images before showing them to the client emerges very much. So not to risk to misleading the client also, or bringing forward unfeasible solution or over-laborious proposals. Connected to this topic is the last issue that we want to raise, that is the one of competencies. What competencies and roles are then assigned on the other side to the designers in integrating these tools to their practice? So as we have seen so broadly so far, the first one seems to be the role of the verifier and controller of the products of these tools. So despite the evocative images or texts produced, it seems that sometimes naive choices are hidden behind these outputs when viewed from the human perspective. And this is followed by the need of reprocessing the outputs. So the infeasibility of the resulting solution in technical, economic, and bureaucratic terms leads the designer to use the output as a baseline to work further, because then sometimes these images are infeasible, but then they give inspiration to work further and change the design that was previously thought. And speaking in terms of competency, the designers have experienced firsthand the importance of giving the right inputs to the tools, to the point that they have started to speculate that new type of roles and skills, if not professions, may emerge, such as the one of the prompt editor. So now we move toward our conclusion and we open the discussion, pointing out that what has been done so far does not pretend to be exhausting, but on the contrary, it's intended to open for more questions that may arise here and continue with research and observation of the practices. And this research was conducting to position ourselves as closely as possible to the experiences collected. So we rejected any omnicomprehensive look of the topic and tried to focus on the implication on the specific context of observation, composed of firms with a small number of components, certain types of projects dealt with, and specific site of intervention. So to leave the floor to our guests, who will help to further open the discussion with their more in-depth experience, we have prepared 2 rounds of questions. One is related to work redistribution, and some questions that we are raising are: how is work redistributed with the introduction of AI, and what is or is not the architect willing to delegate to AI? So I will give the microphone to our guest if someone wants to. They already have it.
Thank you so much. Is this on? Yes. Thank you so much, and I apologize for not speaking in Italian. My Italian is very bad. Thank you for that great presentation, that project. I wanted to say first that I think this type of work is really important. One particular, before I look at the 2 questions in particular, I want to highlight that this type of work is important because when we think about AI, often we are surrounded by ideas that come from the popular press and advertisements and technology companies that have a very specific idea about how AI is supposed to revolutionize or transform or reconfigure all kinds of practices. And I think this type of empirical and grounded work can help us gain a better, more textured understanding of how these tools are actually implemented and they are playing out in practice. Because I think that's where the interesting questions are happening, and that's where the answers to those questions are actually going to start to emerge. So, so thank you for sharing that work. I hope to see it published soon and to continue to evolve. So I'll take a shot at maybe saying a few words about these 2 subjects. I think that the first question is really important because the question already points to what I think is one of the important elements of AI in design and in architecture, which is that it doesn't do away with the work. It doesn't reduce or sort of automate or delete entire workflows. It changes how they are kind of distributed. It changes the way they are organized. It changes the roles of the people involved. And it delegates, another word that came up in the presentation several times, it delegates some of those tasks in new ways, forcing architects and designers and technological developers and designers to position themselves in a new way in the context of architecture and design. There's an anthropologist of science and technology, her name is Lucy Suchman, and I think of something she wrote once when I think of this question of redistributing work, and is that when we think of a technology, in particular computational technologies, we need to see them not specifically in terms of how their makers are presenting them, but in terms of what they're actually doing. And she uses this language, she says something, I'm paraphrasing, we need to see them as propositions. Propositions for how different actors may take their place in the context in our conversation today, architecture, design, project management, and so on. And I think yesterday in the presentation, in the conversation with Fredy, we saw a lot of interesting examples of how all kinds of practices from image production to spatial analysis, layout generation, are supported or aided or transformed as a result of this technology. So I don't think there's one answer to these questions. This is a new landscape that we are starting to explore and so on. I don't know if you want to tag with this or... Yeah.
Firstly, yeah, thank you for the invitation. I'm really happy to be here. And I would like to start answering this question kind of by sharing a bit my personal reasons or my anecdote of why I'm interested in this aspect. I have been interested in anything that allows me personally to be more efficient. So before it was the use of BIM. Instead of drawing plans with AutoCAD tools, I can start using BIM that allows me to be faster or more efficient. And personally now I see that with AI, it allows me to be more efficient in certain tasks. So that's the initial why reason of my interest in the field. But of course, with the efficiency comes a higher or steeper learning curve. Not just because you have these new tools, it means that you're automatically going to generate a good design. Of course, good design comes through a step-by-step process. And that's what I really want to emphasize in the use of these AI tools. These are not, I like to say that they're not metaphorically a magic wand, but rather a power tool that you need to use. Of course, we're now at the top, I would say, of the hype curve of AI, and everyone is talking about it. And it sounds like this complete paradigm shift, but I like to stay a bit more grounded and look at AI as a tool and not give it so many anthropomorphic characteristics, because usually what we're saying is AI, we teach AI or AI learns, but in the end, AI is simply a tool that shows us a certain pattern. It shows us some pattern that we have taught it. It's a statistical analysis, basically, in the purest sense of the word. So that comes with these biases. So by thinking of the work redistribution, what it really does is it makes us be a bit more efficient in certain things, and it allows us to generate images really quickly. But then, of course, we have to be critical. So the work redistribution would be, yes, we can generate thousands of iterations very quickly, but then we have to step back and say, do these iterations make sense? So the work redistribution would be to allow us to have a little bit more time to think critically about the designs, rather than doing the traditional work and spending so much time in developing these thousands of iterations, to say.
Thank you. If I would like maybe to start from something that you already said, also starting from what you had during the lectures yesterday. So it seems that you said being more efficient, being faster, and also you're speaking about how we, let's say, position ourselves towards AI. So it seems quite clear to me, considering work redistribution or how this will change the industry, that we need to move towards responsibility. You know? So sometimes we use these words, teaching something that is not human, no? AI is not human. So some words that seems humanizing something that is not definitely human. And so we need some more responsible, so taking actions, no, towards AI, instead of saying just receiving something, but trying to cooperate, so form of cooperation. No? Sometimes architects have this fault, so to be just users. So many architects use CAD drawings, but I think they don't really know how AutoCAD really works in coding or programming, no? So we use tools, but it's difficult to, let's say, cooperate with these tools, no? Yesterday you already showed some methodologies you are thinking about. So I would like to, in order to go more in deep with this question, understanding how we can emphasize the responsibility or take action together, not towards, like against, but together with AI, maybe, if you can.
Maybe I can, yeah. So I think regarding that, what comes to mind in responsibility is not, I'm very critical about using the models that we have available right now and just simply start using them and sort of call these prompt engineers. I think there's a very careful consideration that you have to think about when calling someone a prompt engineer, because in the end I see it a little bit like alchemy. It's not a very scientific approach in using these models. So I would be very careful in that term and trying to control AI through the perfect prompt. I don't think that's the way to move forward. I think the true goal that we should think about responsibly is to start training our model, our own models, use the data that we have collected, that we have organized, and teach it our own design ethos, and that's what interests us in this field. Not only using a tool just because it's there and it's available, but responsibly cultivating it and aiming it towards what we see architecture should look at.
Yeah, maybe just building a little bit on that. Yeah, I feel like with kind of diffusion models and the availability of these tools online and so on, what we see happening, or what I see happening, is that there will be like a devaluing of a certain aesthetics that is generically using these models to produce images that I think already are starting to feel a little exhausted and tired. The practitioners and the designers, architects, who are able to develop more specific, tailored approaches to their own practices, using strategies like the one Fredy just mentioned, about curating their own data sets, or kind of shaping the data in a way that allows them to have a stronger influence on the output. I think those practices and those designers will start to kind of rise over the general sort of average use of these methods. Yeah, if you think of, I mean, all of us are either practitioners or faculty in architecture schools and so on, and I think we can see this already happening. In a way, I feel like not only with diffusion models, but also with large language models and ChatGPT, we are in the precipice, we are at the edge of a big sort of avalanche of bad information, bad design, bad text, because these are circles of of feedback. Suddenly the internet will be just like an ocean of generated data that is reinforcing its own biases. I'm taking a slightly skeptical and pessimistic view. I'm actually quite optimistic, but I do think we need to be aware that this is going in a direction that should have us a little bit concerned about the direction of design and the direction of, discourse in general and so on. So that's where tailored approaches to curating data, to creating your own models, having more thoughtful approaches to the use of these technologies can be useful, and so on. Something that we also discussed yesterday a little bit is this idea of what does it mean to be a citizen in a society that is shaped by AI technologies and so on. And I was paraphrasing the words of Sherry Turkle, who's a social scientist, who says that 20 years ago, thinking about simulations, she was saying something like, to be a citizen in a society or in a culture of simulation requires that we learn to understand the rules of those systems and so on. And I think we could use that idea and translate it into today's kind of AI culture and world. And I think we need to build new literacies as architects and as designers to understand how these systems are masticating these large amounts of data and regurgitating other kinds of outputs and so on, in order to be able to take those more tailored and thoughtful approaches to design, which will end up creating better, I think, outputs and so on. I think I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your answer. So let's step towards the second, well, if it works, but it doesn't work. Thank you, Fed. Let's step towards the second group of questions about competencies and roles. And we ask you, are there any real new competencies that are found in the application of these tools and which the architect must equip himself with? What are the new roles for the architect that are being defined by AI and which ones are becoming less necessary?
So how we've been lately seeing this field of AI is evolving extremely fast. And we see how we're barely starting to use programs such as dall'I, Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, then a new software more interesting that does not only images but videos like Sora is coming out. And the speed of which this information or these models are coming and how fast they are improving really makes you rethink or think that the most important competency that I would think you have to have is curiosity and flexibility. I think in this fast-changing world, the software that we started using, so I started with AutoCAD, and now AutoCAD should be replaced by other softwares that are much more efficient. And the same thing will happen with AI. Maybe we're using now certain diffusion models, but as the diffusion models increase and become faster and better, we start using another software. So it's this ability to be flexible and on top of these new tools that are coming out. And I like to see it in a sort of playful manner. I think that the best way to learn something is playing with it. That's how children learn. So if you have this attitude of, I don't want to learn this new software because I don't know how to use it, then you will be left behind. So I think that the competency is this playful curiosity as a child.
I agree with the curiosity part. I think that's essential. I wanted to add one thing, and it's the idea of hybridity. And I think it's really important to keep in mind that none of these tools will fully replace existing workflows and practices. They will they will sort of enter into the workplace in interesting ways that cannot be fully prescribed. And I think that's part of the interesting thing. It was so interesting to see in Fredy's practice at MVRDB. It's AI models, but there's also Photoshop and Illustrator, and you're going back and forth between different media in order to kind of refine a process to develop new approaches, new workflows that in themselves are innovative. So yeah, AI, whatever tool we're using, plays a role in shaping a workflow, but they are not entirely replacing a single or an entire task. So I think that's really important. One technique never fully replaces another. So a curiosity, a confidence in the sort of hybrid nature of design that is cross-media, goes from different softwares, physical models, drawings, etc. I think that's a very rich universe of practices that I think it offers a very fertile ground for innovation when combined with new tools.
I would like to start from one word that you said, Fortich, that was being child, no? So a little bit childish. And also yesterday during some lecture you said, okay, let's be fool, let's be sometimes crazy, so experiment, also curiosity. There are some words that have been used many times, But at the same time, there are other words like how we create specific collections, archives, curate. So it seems to me that we have this bias in the middle, no? So having AI in a condition that let us to even lose ourselves in many thousands of alternatives, that where it seems we can put aside, as we said before, responsibility for a bit. And then another side that say, no, we need to be, not say control, as we say, but at least be aware in the way, let's say, we are building even our libraries or our references. If you want to curate, you cannot do from scratch. In some sense, you need to have your own, we can use sort of Pinterest of curation in your mind as well. So in this bias of being child, at the same time being very, let's say, professional, my question that I think also interesting for the audience is what kind of pedagogies we need in this field. Because maybe it seems that our faculty of architecture or our, how we make new professionals are not, let's say, prepared for that, to challenge this bias. I want to know your thoughts about that.
Yeah, so of course I talk about curiosity and child attitude, but from a learning perspective, not from, of course, applying it to a real world construction. What I think you have to see is we have to start to build new methodologies, as Daniel was saying. So what we're aiming to do is try to control or to tame the certain results that we're getting. So the new methodologies that we're trying out is, for example, that I showed yesterday, is the collage-based design, where you start to have this back and forth conversational approach with AI, and the results are more a curated approach. So I would say that traditional tools like Photoshop, Illustrator, even AutoCAD are still completely useful for you to be able to have this digital conversational approach with the AI, because the AI is also digital. So all these tools are completely necessary and a must-have, but of course new ways of interacting with these tools are completely useful. For example, Python programming is something that not many architects are used to use, but it can really help you refine a bit so something very specific like that, or any language programming software can help you start to have better conversations with AI. So it's more looking at it as what will allow you as an architect start to shape a bit the role and the results. So also teaching or learning how to train these models is a very big part. So and basically what we're using also in MVRDV, more than ever, archiving your work, organizing it, being able to find all this information within the sea of terabytes of information that come from our offices becomes more and more important, because I like to refer that we're in a new gold rush, and instead of gold rush is the AI rush, and I'd like to compare the metaphor is the data is the new gold.
I think the question of pedagogy is really, really important today. I work in the United States, and I feel like, at least there, the expectations of the kind of professional education of the architect are such that it makes it very difficult for a curriculum to allow students to explore in any meaningful depth many important questions in architecture, including questions of data, questions of computing, questions of, not to mention other important arenas of work. So sometimes I fantasize with a world where the professional core of the architectural curriculum is not this very rigid structure, but it's a structure that allows for certain flexibilities, that allows students to seek concentrations and seek in-depth knowledge in different fields. I'm not saying that everyone should become an AI expert or a computing expert, but I think we should also recognize that architectural work is very diverse. Architects play all sorts of different roles in the built environment. And I think that the core education of the architect has, at least in the US, remained very fixed on a very specific set of skills and practices that make it difficult to engage with some of these things and others as well. So what would happen if we were to imagine a slightly more flexible curriculum that allows for some architects to become, to gain a specialty in some of these questions of data, of computing and so on. Others may choose a different path and so on, but what would happen if we did that? And how can we reimagine the professional core of the architectural culture to accept that and to produce a new and more diverse cohort of professionals thinking about these questions?
Thank you so much. Considering the schedule really tight of our Biennale Tecnologia for this morning, now we have still, I believe, 10 minutes. I would like to open if there are any questions from our audience. So if you like it, if there's someone. Yes, please.
Hi. Fredy, you mentioned a couple of times about teaching and learning models, I think. Can you explain a little bit what does it mean and how can, like a architectural practice can do this in their environment?
Yeah, so specifically, so AI is a very broad term and it encompasses many things. What I have been particularly looking at right now is the diffusion models, because this is completely image-based production. Of course, this is only a part of the conversation. Then there's the 3D model-based AI that's still in its infancy and still needs a lot of investigation and research. So that part is still, we have to cultivate further, and I'm waiting eagerly for that. But for now, the expertise in what I have been looking at, or we have been looking at at MVRDV, is how to train our own specific smaller models of the stable diffusion. So stable diffusion is one of the diffusion engines that you can use. The interesting thing about that is that you can use another model that works in conjunction with stable diffusion that's called ControlNet, and that one sort of freezes the architecture. So it really, you can have your own intentions and present your own proposal and not a random proposal that comes from other diffusion models like dell'i or Midjourney. And once you have that frozen geometry, you then have to also use, or what we're trying to do is use separate additional models that are called LoRAs, or low ranking adaptations, that are trained on MVRDV proprietary data to learn new concepts, new ways of, new typologies from MVRDV. We tried, for example, a typology that is more like a canyon building, which is one of our buildings that we designed in Amsterdam called the Valley. So it's all these, or we also taught Alora to do a sort of a collage-based approach, because as you can see now, the diffusion images that are generated try to be very realistic, but then you see clear defects in the image quality, and or hands that are deformed, or some deformity. So we like to train these new collage-based image models that will work in conjunction with these defects and really generate something that's a bit more abstract for them. So basically, the models that we're trying to train are LoRa models that teaches the MVRDV design ethos?
Just one quick thing to add to that is that it may or may not be clear that in general what is meant by AI has to do with a specific kind of technology called machine learning, which is, in very broad terms, it is about going from a lot of examples and then being able to interpolate and statistically analyze a large number of things and then produce an output based on that thing. So training a model means having an algorithm sort of process that data in a way that allows it to produce something new that nevertheless belongs to that collection. That's why I think you'll hear many things about the training and teaching. It means processing large amounts of data or smaller amounts of data in order to produce something quote unquote new.
Any other question? Okay, please.
Okay. So first of all, thank you for the conversation. I have a question. You can answer me theoretically and also professionally. So those ChatGPT and Midjourney, in my opinion, are still the simple tools, because if you think the AI is a computational server, which is based on a computer, so how you can be barriered against a virtual machine, which can be the machine learning, because you said Python, which is based on Rhino. I can integrate Rhino with the correct machine learning, and I can take MVRDV's entire design and make my new competition as a result of MVRDV's project. So how professionals or theoreticians can barrier this thing? Because if I want, tomorrow I can make a new MVRDV design for Singapore airport, and maybe it will be same as you, same details, same quality, because I learned your entire 10 years of learnings, designs, drawings, also way you think this process.
I think, I think that's a really important question, and I think it's been also in our minds since yesterday's conversation about what it means for this new world in which these machine learning technologies are able to process a lot of stuff from the web and from websites and social media and proprietary databases and so on, and then produce something that is based on those things. Some communities, some creative communities like graphic designers, visual artists, are concerned because they see their work being sort of reconfigured and represented in new ways without acknowledgement, without compensation, and so on. So there's a movement of people thinking about what this means in terms of the ethics of appropriation and so on. I think and I think that to an extent applies to architecture to the extent of architectural practice that has to do with image production, right? The renderings and images that are also part of what we do and that essential element of architectural culture and practice. However, most of diffusion technologies and these image-based machine learning technologies are producing raster images. They're producing bitmaps, right? And there's not, as we all know, there's not a lot of things we can do with those in an architectural context aside of representation, right? Aside of rendering something. So in a way that kind of protects some of the more sort of engaged and detailed architectural proprietary information that goes into putting together a building, right? And at the same time, that's creating a new kind of technical effort to build more complex data structures that can be processed using machine learning algorithms, and some of the work that we do in my lab has to do with that, inventing new ways of structuring urban and architectural data in order to be analyzed in ways that go beyond the pixel, beyond the image-based process. But I just to end and to let Fredy speak, I think we should keep these questions in mind, the question of, I don't want to say intellectual property because that's one way of looking at it, but it's very legalistic, but the question of acknowledging the question of the ethics of using other people's work to produce something new. Some people think it's transformative use, so it's not really plagiarism. Some people say, well, it's kind of plagiarism because you're taking my work and doing so. I think that these are important questions. I don't have a strong answer, but I think we should keep them in our conversation and in our mind.
Yeah, that was a very interesting question, and I think I briefly touched on the subject of the value of architecture is more the step-by-step process that takes you from one image, from one idea, to another idea. So that methodology that we develop in VRDV of taking the right decisions at each step to arrive to a building that makes sense cannot be really replaced by AI. What we are doing with our LoRa's or our own diffusion models is teaching it to do a certain style that will look raster-based, image-based, but it will not really generate a building that would be otherwise generated with a thought-out process. That's what we as architects are. That's our value. We are the pilots, and we are the critical thinkers, and we are in a sort of way now with all these raster images that are being developed. We are the curators of our own design. So by teaching, by creating these custom models, what we can do is limit the curation and limit the amount of information that we're generating to get to better results, more responsible results.
Is there another question from the audience? Yes. Great.
Thank you. So we live in a more and more connected planet. Everything can be tracked, is being tracked. So, for example, my watch in my hand, I'm sharing my location data with Google, and it's sharing with everyone. What stops an AI that can analyze exponentially more than a human being, tracking my location, using the cameras inside the room to analyze my interaction with the space, and analyzing every building that ever been built which has access to internet, and using all this data to create a more efficient, let's say a hospital or a university, a house. Maybe not the next award-winning architecture, but a building is more efficient because of AI. And maybe an architect will just, in the end, says, okay, it's feasible, so let's build it. So it will replace maybe 99 architects with one AI. Is it feasible?
Again, I go back to the approach of how we should see AI as a pattern recognizer. So because AI simply takes all this data and finds a certain pattern, there is the intrinsic bias, but also from that pattern that the architect simply becomes someone that can use the pattern that's coming from AI and really reinterpret it. So I don't really think that it can replace the critical thinking of the human being if you see it from a perspective that AI is just giving you more information. I think we have to see it more as a tool that can help you be more efficient in certain aspects of your work, but not replace it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think, what I'll mention is that this idea of technologies taking over and replacing and all of that has been, it's not new. And it's been, some of my work is historical, and I've been sort of tracking how since the 50s, people have imagined computers and their role in design. And even in the early 60s, you would find that kind of idea, that the architect would disappear, that the engineer would be kind of removed from the equation, or the other idea, which is complementary, which is that the idea that the computer would free the architect or the engineer to be more creative and to be more, to have more time to do other things. And I think both ideas are wrong. I think what we have seen with the introduction of other technologies like CAD and BIM and other related systems is that the practices change, but nothing fully replaces what was before. And things start to interact in ways that are sometimes unpredictable, sometimes interesting. But I think everyone in the room here, we all know that, you know, a CAD system is not a perfect slave of the designer, as it was touted in the 60s and 70s, or that BIM doesn't kind of make necessarily everyone's life absolutely easier. These systems reconfigure the practices and they put us in different places. And we should keep that in mind. So yeah, I think the quick answer is no. We won't be replaced, but we will change.
I have a question that raised with your conversation, and it's about interdisciplinary. And so I would like to ask you to talk more about the role of artificial intelligence in the relation of architectural discipline with other disciplines and with the dialogue also with the computer, with the machine. Because I was thinking, we talked about BIM, and the aim of BIM was to allow the dialogue between different disciplines, structural, physical, architectural, in one same database, and all talk together in the same software. Maybe AI adds also the layer of cooperating also with a machine. And so I would like to ask you to build up this topic.
So maybe I'll start. So the question of cooperation and the question of interdisciplinarity, right? Yeah, I think the question of cooperation between humans and machines is really interesting because it's something that is fairly new. It's something that became possible with the emergence of interactive computing basically in the 60s, 70s, so within some of our lifetimes. And that was interesting because up until then, machines were imagined to be just tools that did something that are connected to your body in a very particular way and that were devoid of agency. With the emergence of interactive computing, then you suddenly develop not just these new techniques, but also these new ways of thinking and speaking about technology as if it was kind of a human-like, as a human surrogate, right? And then we started anthropomorphizing these machines in a way that allowed us to think of, yeah, human-robot collaboration or human-machine interaction and so on. And that has been obviously very productive and interesting in some ways, but I think it also can occlude important questions and facts about these machines as design systems, as systems that are designed by people for a particular purpose, with a particular understanding of practice in mind. When we are using a CAD system or a diffusion model or a machine learning algorithm, we're not collaborating in the same way that we can collaborate as people. We are engaging with a system that is interactive for sure. It has agency, yes. But I think it's a stretch to call it cooperation. And I think when we remember that it's something that is a technical system designed for a particular purpose, with a particular data set feeding it, or a particular set of rules, etc., then we can engage with that system a little more creatively, right? So this is, I am advocating for a more sort of demystified view of these systems, to de-anthropomorphizing them in order to kind of engage with them creatively and critically a little more. The question of interdisciplinarity is also really interesting because also in this period of technological and cultural transformation, the logics of computer science and engineering start to sort of expand into other fields. In some ways, these technologies are transferred into different professional ambits, but they were not developed necessarily with the logics of those professional ambits in mind. So it's like a mobility of technical systems that some scholars have described as a sort of colonization, right? So in a way, the wide implementation of these technologies means also that we start thinking in a certain way. I don't know if I would go that far, but I think it's interesting to keep in mind that there's already a knowledge, a worldview that is encoded in the systems that we use, and that when we use kind of diffusion models or CAD or BIM, etc., we're also engaging with a way of structuring practice. And as architects, as professional architects, but also as architectural scholars and researchers, I think it's essential to have that kind of infrastructural view and to understand how the practices are being reconfigured so that we can position ourselves in a way that is a little more pliable and critical, and also that gives us more, positions us better to have a more creative role in our own practices. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question about the connection, the cooperation of computer and human. And now we're very much into the hype of talking about AI, but there's the part with the BIM modeling that's, I feel that is very important to talk about also, because it goes back to our responsibility as architects and really modeling something that we can use in the future. So taking into account the embodied energy, the embodied carbon, and the operational carbon that goes into the use of building the building and also then using the building. So if you consider that part of the BIM approach, and really consider what you can use because usually what we like to do is think of the building just as the initial stages, and then we forget about it in a way. But with BIM, what you can do is use the material passport and have all that information for future use. So considering all the data that goes into the model and not just plans or sections and elevations that are fabricated and then kind of forgotten, but rather use it for the whole life cycle analysis of the project. I think that's a very important role that we should be considering and organizing and archiving properly so that future generations or future architects can use also.
So, thank you so much. Sorry, we are running out of time, and there are some definitely humans and not artificial intelligence people calling us to stop our intervention. So I would like to thank, first of all, President Milanese, Professor Cardoso, Architect Fortich, Luciana Mastrolia, Federica Gardella, and all of you for attending this first, let's say, conversation of this morning. And okay, the program will continue. I switch to Italian for a while. Vi devo ricordare che, allora, prima di tutto, nel cortile adesso ci sarà una presentazione che vi invitiamo di andare a vedere del progetto Sasso, Small Alpine Shelter for Scientific Observation, che è questo modulo di architettura alpina sviluppato al nostro dipartimento col supporto di molte aziende, molto interessante. E poi a brevissimo, al di là di piccoli ritardi, alle 11:30 ci sarà un altro dialogo, Smart Cities, piattaforme e giustizia sociale, con Luciana Tozzi e Francesca Governa. Grazie e buona continuazione.